So, as I was writing this lesson, I got to thinking about times gone by, and I got to thinking about how I used to live in this big white house at the Matt property, which anyone who's been to the Matt property has seen it. It's relatively large. It's not huge or anything, but it's covered in mold now, so we can't live there anymore. And it's sad. But I remember looking back in that house, and I remember good times. I remember hanging out with Blaine in the house, and we played GameCube, and we hung out with Caleb, and it was fun. And I remember once I called Kathy Grandma in that house, and I'm still embarrassed about that to this day. Sorry, Kathy. And I also remember that there was times whenever I would sit and while I'd lay in my parents' bed, my mom would read stories to us, and I remember it was nice and it was warm and it was cozy. And I guess that kind of brings me to my passage. It's Psalm 15. The first verse says, "O Lord, who shall sojourn in your tent? Who shall dwell on your holy hill?" Some translations say, "Who shall sojourn in your tabernacle?" And the whole idea is just who can dwell in God's house? Who can live with God? Who can experience that warm fuzzy with God? Because really, that's kind of what God is all about. He is the ultimate whatever. He's God. You can climb into the middle of his bed and it's warm, and he'll read you a story, and it's awesome. And the whole chapter, which I won't read all of it, but the whole chapter is just about how you get there, how you can experience God. And the verse I really want to talk about tonight is verse 4, which says, talking about the person that can dwell in God's house. It says, "In whose eyes a vile person is despised, but who honors those who fear the Lord, who swears to his own hurt and does not change." I don't really like this translation. I like the NIV translation better. It actually says, "who keeps an oath even when it hurts." And I want to tie that idea into Samson. As my dad said this morning, Samson is a big part of our VBS. And so I really got to learning the story of Samson over the years as we would do this VBS. But I didn't know is that Samson actually makes an appearance in Hebrews 11. I learned that at the Samson play this year. But he's in the faith chapter, which really doesn't make sense. Because throughout the entire story of Samson, basically what he does is, at the beginning of the story, he makes this oath. Actually, his parents make this oath. But he's a Nazirite, which basically means he can't cut his hair, he can't drink wine or eat grapes, and he can't touch dead things. And basically throughout this story, he's going around and he's breaking God's law, and he's not being proper Nazirite. He kills a lion at one point, and then he comes back and he takes honey out of its carcass, which is breaking his vow. And so for some reason, he appears in this faith chapter. And let's see, where is it? Hebrews 11:32. "What more shall I say? For time would not fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, who were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight." And I feel like a lot of times whenever we think of Samson, we think of this big, strong guy who was able to conquer all of these kingdoms. He was able to kill 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey. And we think of him as this biblical hero. But really, that's not what he was, because, the whole time he's going around, he's breaking his oath, and eventually he's taken down by the Philistines, and he's put to shame, he's blinded, and he's weak. And that is where he really shines. I think a lot of times we put him together with all of these military heroes, but really he's this part of the verse that says they were made strong out of weakness. In his moment of weakness, that's whenever he sees God, because really none of us can keep our oaths. None of us are capable of keeping our promises to God, but it's okay, because Samson isn't able to keep his promise either. Samson goes through life and he constantly breaks his promise, and he's probably worse than every one of us in this room. But for some reason, at the end of the story, God lets him destroy the temple, and he lets him kill more Philistines in his death than he does in his entire life. And the moral of the story is that none of us can keep our oaths, but God can. The moral of the story is that Jesus came down and he died for each and every one of us. And he's the one, the only person in the universe who can keep his oaths, and he did. And so I guess that's just what I wanted to say for tonight.
Amen. We are the Sonny Childs and Family Ministries, serving as missionaries to this great nation. Please pray for us and consider adding us to your missions giving.